Welcome to the 40 Plus Fit podcast, which is dedicated to helping you, people over 40, rediscover your fittest, healthiest selves. We know that navigating the world of wellness can feel like wading through a minefield of information, especially when it comes to what we eat. Today, we're tackling a topic that often gets a bad rap. But is it always the villain? We're diving in deep into the world of processed foods. Are they sabotaging your fitness goals? Or can some actually be a part of a healthy lifestyle? Let's unpack the truth behind those labels and empower you to make informed choices.
I was just waiting patiently there just to make sure that I didn't jump in and interrupt and just like I did for the last episode, right? Where you were halfway going through the intro. But how are you, Mike?
Yep, pretty good, pretty good. Looking excited about the episode today.
Yeah, man. This is a topic that I enjoy talking about because there's actually a lot of nuance to it. And I get a lot of questions on this, even from like long-term clients sometimes, just because, it's one of those things where with social media and a lot of the marketing that surrounds food and, people being in different diet cults, if you will,
Mm.
everybody likes to demonize certain foods, right? So we always get questions on this. It's a never-ending thing. But hopefully this episode helps you, the listener here, get a bit more clarity on it. And hopefully you can appreciate the nuances to the topic and you can then use that information to make your own decisions on when you might want to indulge in certain types of processed foods and when you might actually want to use certain types of processed foods for your own health and your own goals, your own fitness goals.
Okay, so let's just jump right in and start with the basics.
Go
So
on,
we're gonna,
man.
let's just clarify first, what exactly is processed food? Is it just the stuff in boxes and bags, or is there more
Hmm.
to it?
Like this question of processed food always gets a simple yes or no, right? Where this thing is processed or this thing is unprocessed. But the reality is that majority of our foods are all processed. Okay, due to food technology, due to improved understanding of how to make foods last longer, to make food more available to people worldwide. This is a great thing. This is a good thing. Now, that being said, a lot of times with these kind of improvements, things can oftentimes get to the extreme and we can overly depend on them and creates different problems. So processed foods essentially just refers to when the food has been altered from its raw form, okay, for specific purposes of maybe safety, shelf stability, convenience, even for flavor as well. So simply cooking your food is processing food, if you think about it from that perspective, right? People have been processing food for the longest time. People have been curing meats. People have been making cheese. All this kind of stuff. This is all food processing. And so I always like to tell clients, hey, when you think about processed foods, most people are probably referring to what we would consider the ultra high processed foods. The shelf stuff where it's Cocoa Pops or sweets or all these kind of products on the
All the
shelf,
yummy stuff.
all the yummy stuff, all the stuff that gives you that little brain
Dopamine kick.
dopamine hits, right? The kicks in your brain. But it's really a big umbrella of processing where on one extreme end you have minimally almost non-processed foods, foods you can just pick up from, like if you grow it, you can pick it up and just eat it after you wash it, obviously. But even washing, would washing be considered processing it? But
Yeah. Yeah.
But let's say if you pick it from let's say a fruit, you pick a fruit from the tree, you crack it open, you eat it. Okay, great. That's like non-processed pretty much. And then there's minimally processed, there's extra, like I would say moderately processed, and obviously we have the ultra processed foods. So I think if we look at it from that perspective, we can start to see and broadly categorize things. Obviously, there will be different overlaps here and there, but you can categorize it.
Mm.
One for simplicity of this discussion as well, so that everybody understands where we're coming from. Let's say minimally processed foods are stuff that's washed, pre-cut, frozen fruits, for example, roasted nuts, maybe. These foods tend to retain most of their nutritional value and would often be considered like the healthiest options because they are pretty much as close to their so-called natural state as possible, but made safe to eat because natural doesn't always mean safe, right? So there's many things that we have, in nature that we cannot actually eat. Example, we can't eat like cocoa seeds just like that. You have to actually process it to make it into cocoa powder to make chocolate, right? So different things like this, and certain things where you have to kind of process it to make it healthy and safe for you to eat. Then there's the moderately processed stuff. There will be example, I would say maybe foods that have added other added ingredients and preservatives, but not to the point where it's totally stripped of all its nutrition, meaning the micronutrient aspects. So these foods could be stuff like canned beans, smoked meat, smoked salmon, like I mentioned earlier, cheese, processing wheat into bread. All these stuff I would consider under the processed category. And then obviously the ultra processed stuff is going to be foods that contain a whole lot more additives. So actual chemical additives. Again, chemical doesn't mean bad, but actual chemical additives, artificial flavors, emulsifiers, all these synthetic stuff that is meant to help the food stay safe to eat for longer. Yeah. They're usually going to be high in sugar and fat, and also salt, because these are three options that work very well for actually preserving foods to make them very, very shelf stable. So naturally, the nutritional value from a micronutrient perspective in terms of the vitamins and the minerals you can get from it will be lower. Yeah. Because one of the main things about it is that the less processed the food is, the more it tends to have and retain its micronutrient value. Because that's the thing also that kind of keeps the food, that what makes the food really healthy also kind of like reduces the shelf life of the food, makes it easier for it to spoil. So that's the general category. So far, might make sense, do you think?
Yeah. Basically, we're looking at there's a difference between, say, pre-cut vegetables and a bag of chips. One is
100%, yeah.
minimal processed, the other one is ultra processed.
Yeah.
And then you were just discussing about the nutritional value as what you're getting out of each of those.
Yeah.
But one thing that I always come to here, though, is like, once you pass this as an age, you've passed certain milestones in your life and all those kind of things. So you start living a life where, you're like juggling careers. You have to attend
Yeah.
to families. You're trying to, but on the other end, you're still trying to prioritize your health, right?
100%, man.
So convenience really becomes a big factor to you. You
Yeah.
can't always be like we in our mind, we want to be those people that like Tom Brady, right? You eat only organically prepared berries, seven types of berries, and you eat this and everything is in its original form.
Hey
But
man, if you're earning the millions that he is, you can definitely afford
yeah,
it. You
but
can even
but
afford to hire the private chef to cook all this shit for you.
that's right, that's right. But unfortunately, I think the majority of us are not sitting in that
Yeah.
position. And so we don't
Yep.
have that access to all of that whole foods, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you're looking now and you're coming back to this one, is as I said earlier, is convenience becomes a big factor. So
Yeah.
how can some minimally processed foods actually help us stick to healthy eating habits?
Yeah, I would say we actually probably don't even just want to look at minimally processed foods. We also probably want to start looking towards that intermediate range of moderately and minimally to moderately processed foods. The good part about it is that um, a lot of the food technology allows us to have more accessibility and convenience to the food, because now foods that previously would not have been, ages ago before the idea of preserving meats, or flash freezing meats and stuff, right, was brought about, you would not be able to get meats so readily off the shelf from the freezer and be able
Mm.
to keep it for such a long period of time. Um, I think even as recent as maybe just like 50 years ago, was it, or 60 years ago, people were still using freezers or fridges where they could actually put the ice block in it. So that's really like the old school style, right? So I think in the past couple decades, like food tech has really come a long way. And this convenience and accessibility is really the biggest thing that, if used correctly, can really help you continue to stay healthy while still juggling everything else that you need to juggle. So I would say when we look at it from that perspective, you want to look at the foods as, hey, frozen foods are actually great. Like frozen fruit, frozen veggies, these are such fantastic options. And oftentimes they're actually cheaper per volume and amount of veggies you're getting compared to getting them fresh. Now, if you get them fresh, you have the time to wash, pre-cut them, by all means, that would be fantastic. But the nutritional value between that and foods that are like frozen or flash frozen are actually still very, very, very much comparable. Yeah. So that's one thing you can definitely use. Like these are great options for, I have so many clients that are really busy, like you mentioned, and if you think about it from their perspective, like context is so important for a mom that, is trying to juggle not just a career, her work, but also to take care of the kids, has to pick up the kids. I have like some clients that are in that kind of position, right, where they don't have a helper, they need to cook their own food and stuff for the kids or even for themselves to make sure that they eat healthy meals. They need something that's easy. They don't have the luxury of like buying meats and saying, "Oh, I'll do some meal prep and cook everything fresh or whatever," right? So I think not everybody's in that position of just being so fortunate with that. And so frozen foods are probably one of the best ways to go about it. I think, and I've shared with a lot of clients, like there's tons of these like frozen chicken breast fillets, especially in like Singapore and Malaysia right now. There's quite a few companies that sell these kind of chicken breast fillets, tenders, where you can just take them out. They're already pre-portioned for you, pop them into the air fryer, and then after that you just season them with whatever you want to season or buy some other sauce, right? And you just eat it together. It's going to be a fantastic meal, and then you just microwave some frozen veggies. Maybe you might want to add some rice to it. Maybe you might want to put it all together into get some lettuce, put it all together in a wrap, and you can eat that. So these are all very easy, convenient meals that you can make. Yeah, and they still retain majority of their nutritional value anyway. So that's one big option, right? I think another big option, and this is one thing that I've noticed also recently has been quite popular, is canned foods. Okay, specifically canned proteins. Traditionally, I think a lot of times when we think about canned food and protein, we immediately go to tuna. Tuna. And I know for myself as a young man trying to get into bodybuilding and making sure my diet is super full on, canned tuna was one of the staple golden foods of bodybuilding. But canned tuna and water chunks taste like cardboard, man. It's so hard to make it taste great. But nowadays, there's just so many different varieties. In Singapore, there's a very popular brand. I think Malaysia as well, right? Singapore, Malaysia. It's called Ayam brand.
Mm.
Ayam is the Malay word for chicken, right? It's called Ayam brand, and they have like so many different flavors of tuna. And then recently they've expanded that over into, I think they also have canned salmon, and more importantly, they have canned chicken, pulled chicken. So the chicken one has been a big hit with a lot of my clients. All right. So for those of you who are listening, if you are in Southeast Asia, there's that option. In North America, for majority of the audience that's in North America, I think number one, go to Costco. I'm sure there's so many Kirkland style canned meats that you could easily get, and then you could just season that up, mix that up, and put that together with, like I said, into a wrap with some veggies and stuff. That's
Mm.
also a really easy meal to make. Yeah. So there's so many of these options. And so I think the important thing to understand here is a lot of times people that are trying to push an agenda or push a specific diet style because they're so bought into that particular style of dieting, right? They tend to try to demonize all these other foods because they tell you, oh, these canned foods have like all these preservatives, this had this specific chemical in it that makes it bad for you and whatever. But the reality is with the way the safety standards are now in the world, there is no longer the case where it's like, previously things like asbestos or whatever can be used in the building of houses and all that, right? But it's a case where things have to go through a huge amount of red tape before they can get approved. And so a lot of these things that go onto the shelf are oftentimes really, really safe. And the cool part is you can actually just have faith in your body if you are exercising hard and you are, you don't have any other specific medical complications, not as a result of lifestyle, but like just actual dysfunctions in your body, medical dysfunctions, then your body's resilient enough to handle whatever you put in it. And usually the most people that make the most noise about these kind of stuff are often the ones that are still like either smoking or they're just drinking a lot of alcohol or whatever. And it's like, you're probably focusing on the wrong thing. Yeah, so don't worry too much about like the mini chemical, so to speak, because everything is a chemical. If you put out the chemical list for, let's say, a banana, it will be super long. You'll be unable to pronounce majority of the words. Yeah.
Mm.
So Yeah, so I think these are like really good options. The canned foods, the frozen foods, these are fantastic foods to use, especially if you're super busy, you don't have time. And then of course having getting an air fryer, which is essentially a mini oven, man. I could go on about that because I think whoever thought of an air fryer, like reals, was really innovative, you know. Whoever thought of that is definitely making bank. It's just a mini oven, right?
Yeah.
Isn't
But
it?
but it comes out so much tastier though.
Yeah, it number one, it's a mini oven that's a lot easier to control and it
Mm.
feels doesn't feel as challenging as using a regular oven because regular oven, what do you have to do? You got to preheat that, you got to line the tray, you know, it's so big and inbuilt
Yeah,
usually into the furniture or sorry, the carpentry or the fixtures, right? So
that's right.
man, that's smart, man. That's smart.
You touched on eating tuna. So tuna is like also a good staple in our house as well. We love to have our tuna. There is the
Yep.
concern though is that in recent years the levels of mercury in tuna has gotten a lot higher. So
Mm,
for us is like we won't have like when I was younger, I could have tuna every single day. You know,
yep.
it's okay. I'll whack it, no problem. But now I'm probably influenced by some influences or by some journals that I've read with the
Yep.
levels of mercury that's higher. I prefer now to eat more of a variety. So I'll have
Oh yeah.
my tuna, but I'll have tuna maybe twice a week. Then I'll have my
Yep.
chicken. Chicken I'll have obviously a lot more because I'm yet to hear anybody demonize chicken as yet. But
Yep.
that's a different story we'll go on to. So what I want to get to here though is that with that in mind is what are the real concerns with heavily processed foods? I mean, when we're looking at it, most of the time we talk about things like they have excess sugar or excess salt,
Mm,
or as you put out earlier, excess unhealthy fats. I
yeah.
mean, we won't go into the artificial additives because you did touch on the point is it needs to pass all the safety measures first. So I don't want us to demonize food from that perspective as to, like, oh, if you're going to eat tartarine, you're going to die. Oh, if you're going to eat aspartame, you're going to die. Not these
Yeah.
kind of things. But what I
Yeah.
want to focus on here in this discussion is like when you're looking at excess sugar, excess salt, and excess unhealthy fats, how
Yes.
do these actually impact our energy levels or our weight journey, or
Yeah.
even
I,
our
I
overall health as we get older?
yeah, yeah. I think this is a fantastic question also because there are very valid concerns with I would say the processed foods, but it's not even just processed foods on its own. Obviously, I think everybody that's listening by now would be able to discern when somebody is demonizing like something and it's something they can really just like not listen to, right? So example, if you see somebody demonizing a specific food on social media, you probably can just stop listening to them. Okay, they probably have no idea what they're really talking about. And they're just trying to try to trigger emotions and try to get people to buy their shit. So that's that. But there are still some very valid concerns which you brought up, which is some of these foods there can be very high in sugar, salt, some of the unhealthy fats, which for somebody that's very sedentary, not very active, could potentially become an issue. These foods tend to fall closer towards the ultra processed foods category, though. Okay, so that's mainly what we're actually trying to discuss here. And what is in the ultra processed foods category? We're talking about stuff like chips. We're talking about stuff like your um chocolates, right? We're talking about stuff like your sweets, all the little desserty stuff, all the nice, tasty, so-called junk food that people have come to collectively term it. And so the issue here, oftentimes, aside from just the calories being really, really high, is also the fact that I feel many of these companies that make these things, they are trying to turn a profit. Okay, there's no harm in that. Obviously, a business has to make money. But in order to do that, they need people to buy their food more and more. And a lot of these foods, in terms of food science, they're actually engineered to be hyper palatable. Okay, so hyper palatability just means that the food tastes so damn good that you want to eat more of it. And eating more of it does not make you sick of eating it. Let's say if you take rice, white rice. I'm sure there are some people, outliers out there, will be like, oh, I love white rice. I could eat a ton of white rice, whatever. But I say, okay, cool. Eat your first bowl, you'll be like, yeah, that's pretty nice. Eat the second bowl, you'll be like, oh, wow, I'm still going really strong. Still tastes pretty good. Eat your third bowl, you're like, I think I'm kind of getting a bit full, but I can still eat this. Maybe go up to the fourth bowl, you'll be like, oh, wow, okay, I'm starting to get a bit full. This isn't as enjoyable as I thought. Try to go to the fifth bowl, you'll be like,
Hmm.
Go get it out
So,
of my sight.
so
Yeah.
just for those in if you're listening in the US or the UK or wherever, when we're talking about bowl, we're talking about the Asian bowls, not like the actual cereal bowl or anything like that.
Oh yeah,
But
yeah, yeah. I'm
yeah,
talking about that Asian blue
yeah,
color China bowl. I'm sure many of
yeah,
you would have seen it if you pop into an Asian restaurant. But yeah, so if you do that with like regular white rice, you're not gonna experience that level of like, oh, I want to eat more, right? But let's say you open a can of Pringles. What's their slogan? Once you pop, you can't stop.
yeah.
And the way the chip has been engineered is to make it very, very light. It has to have this thing called vanishing food density, which means that when you eat the thing, there's no weight to it in your mouth. It does not register. But the calories still register in your body. Don't get me wrong, right? It's still going in,
Mm,
but it doesn't feel like you ate anything. And so it's very easy to smash a whole can of Pringles without realizing. And oftentimes, when the people eat these foods, they don't eat them sitting down at the dinner table and being like eating it mindfully and slowly enjoying it. No, we just eat it while we're distracted, either when we are working, trying to catch a break, or when we're watching TV. So I think that's the major issue for ultra processed foods. It's not so much that they are bad for you, it's that for most people, they act as a very easy way to get a quick fix and quick hit, especially when they feel bored or when they feel like they want something to munch on. All these things I hear clients say. And I get it because it's so available, it's so readily available to us nowadays. And so we have unwittingly, for some people, have unwittingly conditioned themselves to be, very dependent on it. So the reality is you need to focus on detraining yourself from depending on these foods, to retrain yourself back up to understand what exactly is a want in terms of your desire to eat a certain thing, and when do you actually follow that desire, or when do you actually hold back from it.
mm,
And this comes with like, mindfulness eating, eating with intention, things like this, which is a bigger topic now that I think has grown a lot in recent years, which is a testament. This is part of a new problem that's brought about by the advancement of food. So we went from people starving, there's still people, don't get me wrong, in the world that's starving and all, but for most of the developed world, I can't remember the exact stats, but I remember reading about the fact that for the most part, I think people dying from malnutrition has dropped so dramatically in the world that it's considered, even this is even in third world impoverished countries, it's dropped so dramatically that it's not even a thing. And a lot of it is concentrated in, heavily uh, politically locked countries, right? You're talking about North Korea, talking about all these other areas that are not privy to the modernization of the rest of the world. Yeah. So a lot of these things are just things that right now, for these ultra processed foods, it comes down to the fact that many people are not aware that their actions are the problem, not so much the food itself. The food is just the thing that enables them to continue with this kind of addictive behaviors. Okay, and then what happens is the more you eat that, the easier it is to overeat, because you can easily eat two Snickers bars, right? Versus, let's say two Snickers bars is about 500 calories. If you want to eat the same thing in apples, for example, there will be about six apples, seven apples. Yeah, so you can easily eat two Snickers bars. You ask me to eat two apples, I'm like, you know what? I'm kind of full already from two apples. So it's that thing, it's the overeating aspect.
yeah,
And the problem with hyperpalatable food is that it disrupts your ability to regulate your appetite as well.
yeah. I
Yeah.
find the same from people that I also chat to. Is like they consume a lot of energy drinks.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, okay, so are you working out? No. Like, oh, do you do a lot of steps? No. Like, well, why are you drinking all these energy drinks? And it's like, oh, I like the taste.
Oh man. Yeah.
And then I'm like, but there might be a reason why you're not losing the weight.
Yeah, a lot of it, the liquid calories, that one plays a big part too.
Yeah.
You know,
Because it's so easy to consume, right?
it's
You can just
really,
sit there, you can drink 340 mils, 500 mils within a quick sitting,
yeah,
but it's works out to the same amount of calories as you actually had a meal already for some of these energy drinks.
for
And
sure.
so that will lead me on to my next question, as I was like, when you're starting to look at these kind of things, like we discussed here, the excess sugar, excess salt, all this kind of stuff. When you start looking or becoming more aware of these kind of things, and you you want to become like the social influencers that are demonizing the stuff in the what's it, the store alleys, and you're looking at the ingredients. And when you start looking at those ingredients, there's a lot of words there we don't understand. So it's like
Yeah.
learning a whole new language. But what are some key things that our listeners could actually look for to understand, as, okay, perhaps this is high sugar or this is high salt within the ingredients like that, that maybe these are not the wisest choices?
Mm, I think that's an interesting question. I would say a lot of it is not so much to do with reading the ingredients and getting like too focused on the ingredients because that requires a whole skill set of understanding fundamentally um a bit more about, let's say, like the an intro to at least like the food science aspect of things, and also an intro and understanding to specific additive types. What do they do? How do they help make things more shelf stable? Things like that. Broadly, I would say that if most of the food that you buy, even though it comes in a package or a box, but you look at the ingredients and you're like, okay, I recognize most of these stuff, then you're probably choosing something that's better in that sense. I'm also very hesitant to say that. You can tell, right? I'm very hesitant to say that because I wouldn't go via the ingredient list purely. What I would actually look at more is number one, look at the label and see what the label actually states. Because it's much easier for people to learn how to read the label. So how much carbs are there in this thing? How much fat is there in this thing? How much protein is there in this thing? Okay, and then what are you buying this thing for? What is the nutritional value that you are trying to get out of this thing beyond just this thing tastes good? Because if you're buying the thing because it tastes just because it tastes good, then you know that likely the thing you're buying is probably something you want to eat in more moderation. If I had to give you like some sort of a heretic to go with, right? Um, sorry, heuristic, not heretic. Heretic is like a totally different thing. But a heuristic to go with is that if you're buying the thing just purely for the taste, oh, this thing tastes great, I want to eat it. Okay, you're probably buying something that you need to eat in more moderation. All right, so it's probably going to be some sort of chips or whatever. Now, if you're buying other regular food, then you probably want to make sure, okay, what am I buying this thing for? So if I'm buying, example, peanut butter, I'm buying it because, yeah, not only does it taste good, but it should give me some sort of healthy fats, right? Or at least help satisfy my fat requirement in my diet. So if I look at the label, then I should see that majority of the calories should come from fats. So 1 tablespoon of peanut butter generally should be roughly about 15 grams of fat, 13 to 15 grams of fat. And the amount of protein in it should probably be somewhere around, I think, six or yeah, 5 to 6, something like this. And then maybe the carbs should be relatively low, same thing around like 5 to 6 grams, maybe 8 grams, something like that. So you know, like, okay, cool. That's pretty much the same macros as a regular peanut. Yeah. But if you buy something like a Skippies and then you have that with much higher amounts of, because they tend to add a little bit more sugar in there, it might have like a much higher amount of carbs in it than regular. Now, does that fit into your budget? In terms of your calorie budget, is that where you want to spend your calories? If not, then you probably want to opt for an option that will be a bit less than that. So this is how I would say you can make really sensible and really meaningful decisions in your food selection process. Yeah, so learn how to read the actual nutrition label and not worry too much about the ingredients because, again, like I said, if you are buying a thing because it tastes great, it's probably already something that you're just eating because it's enjoyable to eat. So you need to eat that in moderation, and that becomes more of the mindfulness aspect.
I think if I had to add anything there, it would be is that it also depends on your situation. Like
Mm,
if you are living an active lifestyle and your body's all good and functioning well, I would say is like, okay, you're open to eating most of these things, no problem. You go and choose and you can enjoy it and consume it. But let's say you're sitting with issues. Like one is maybe you are have excess weight, right?
yeah.
Or two is maybe you are pre-diabetic or something like that.
Yeah.
These are the things then where I usually say is, okay, now we start looking at the labels. And good that you pointed out that, you must look at the food labels, because that was actually my question. I used the wrong term there by saying ingredients. But you start looking at the labels, and what you're looking at is like, okay, let's say if you one that suffers from very high blood pressure, right? With that in mind, you want to stay away from too much salt intake, right? If you're suffering from pre-diabetic or whatever, you don't want to go and now take too much sugar, these kind of things. So you're looking at that from that practical perspective as
Mm.
to, okay, this is now I'm in this situation. So obviously I need to look out for these things in the food labels. You don't want to take the excess of these. So I speak from perspective of mine is where I'm not sure if I shared before is that I only have one kidney. So
Mm.
I have things that I need to look out for to ensure that I can regulate my particular levels. And these are things that for me is I need to look at. So you gave the great example of peanut butter, right? So if you go and look at peanut butter, you get different types of peanut butter on the shelf. And when you start looking at those, you get some that are like just peanuts, right? So
Yeah.
yes, it's got the fat, it's got the protein, it's got all that. It's all good. But then you get the next one and it's like with added sugar. And then you see the amount of sugar. Some of them is like, okay, it's just a little bit, just add the taste. But others, wow, it's a lot of sugar that they put inside there. That if you're consuming that, that would not be the best option for me. But the other one is. So I don't have to root out peanut butter. I just need to find out which peanut butter would suit me best. And that's
Yeah.
coming back to the point that you made earlier as well, with regards to we live in such abundance and convenience nowadays, is that almost anything that you need or you want, you can find. You just need to go and look for it.
Yeah, you don't even need to look for it, to be honest. Sometimes you can just order it in. Like nowadays,
That is so true.
online shopping for groceries is a thing. Even in Australia here, where I'm based, I see people, buying their groceries and getting it delivered rather than going to the store and just picking up items and stuff. Which I mean, I get, no convenience, obviously, it has its place. But I do think there's a lot of merit to kind of learning how to choose the foods for you and then building out that list, and the system that works for you.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
And it all goes, it's a personalized thing. It's not
It
a
really is.
one
It really
fits
is.
all.
I do want to say though, when we talk about making smarter choices with processed foods, I would like to default back to the part about trying to select more of the minimally processed stuff to make up the bulk of your diet, because what matters most is your overall diet pattern, right? What matters most for health is not specifically the um at least at the topmost level, it's not specifically the types of foods we eat first and foremost, it's about the total amount that we eat. But the reality is that if we actually focus on the types of foods that we eat and we get a good quality to the foods, again, within that moderate to minimally processed range, 80% of the time, you are already going to generally take care of the total amount that you eat. Because most people that eat, just fruits, veggies, your meats, if you prioritize all those things first, you find that what happens is your natural eating cues will actually regulate back down. Meaning you have a good sense of like fullness, satisfaction, and all this kind of good stuff that will naturally regulate how much you will eat.
Mm.
Now, the issue comes in where for many people, they actually have this much higher condition level of, let's say, uh, food uh what do you call it? Like we call it food noise. Basically, in their head, they are so conditioned to be like eating all this hyper palatable food, always having the food being a very like ultra tasty, ultra high dopamine kick from it. That for them to eat so-called a regular bunch of whole foods, eat some fruits, eat some veg. Not only are those really bland to them, but that feels like dieting to them. When that's actually the norm. Eating all these whole foods is actually the norm, right? And I think that part is its own problem to solve. Meaning, you first of all have to be very real with yourself and say, you know what? I think my taste buds, all this stuff is just out of whack. And in worst of the cases I've seen with clients is because I do work with a lot of like clients, ladies specifically, in the program where they are oftentimes not having the best relationship with food and they have decades upon decades of binge eating or kind of these habits they build up where they depend on the food for that comfort. It's just something that's been conditioned to them. So sometimes your food sensitivities can be so skewed, your eating cues can be so disrupted that you end up having to put a lot of work into kind of regulating them down. But it's also a necessary process, and I can tell you that, at some point you will find that balance. But the important thing to understand is that no one food is like really, really bad for you in any instance, right? Except for I think the only thing I would say that's really bad for you that is still widely accepted and socially acceptable and even encouraged sometimes is alcohol. But it's so entrenched in our society already that yeah, all we can do is just teach people about safe consumption, manage the moderation of it. But the
Mm.
reality is that alcohol is like it's not healthy at all. Yeah.
So if we jump on and push through here, we're running out of time. What are, well, probably two questions left. Let me ask them at the same time so you can see how you want to answer them uh, going
Right.
forward. Is number one, sometimes when you look at processed foods, they're usually, and I think you alluded to this right in the beginning, is processed foods are usually tied to like comfort or emotional eating, right?
Yeah.
So, one, the question is, how can we address that and build healthier relationships with food? And then my follow-up question to that is also, what are some easy swaps that we can make to choose less processed alternatives without spending hours in the kitchen?
Hmm. I think probably I'll just answer the easy swaps part because I think that would already encompass majority of this solution, which is going back to what I mentioned. In terms of easy swaps, you probably want to swap out the fresh veg for more frozen veg because unless you have the ability to cook almost every day or every other day, fresh veggies are probably not going to last very long, right? So it's probably better to just have them frozen because when they are frozen, they actually last longer with and retain the same nutritional value. So that's the first thing. The other thing would be do not sleep on your canned meats, as I mentioned, right? They actually do come in quite well to help make like really simple, easy meals. The other option will also be frozen meats. So I'm talking about actual whole meats, not the preserved, overly preserved meats, but like actual chicken breasts or actual chicken fillets or chicken thighs that have been kind of flash frozen and already portioned out for you. Yeah, so don't sleep on those things. Otherwise, the other swaps would be simple things like just choosing more of the lower fat options for the most part. So, example, if you're eating, let me think, instead of eating like regular full fat milk, for example, maybe you might drink skim milk. Yeah. And the reason for that is because oftentimes if we buy uh foods or processed foods that generally have higher fats, we are kind of already taking a pretty decent amount of calories. And going with the fat-free options or the low-fat options for some of these foods tend to mean that we are reducing the calories without really sacrificing too much of the taste. So I do think that that's a very practical kind of swap that you can easily make. And then that allows for you to kind of expand out your budget to, the kind of meals that you would eat out anyway. Because the reality is most people are going to be eating out, right? At least 3 days, 2 to 3 days in a week. I think most people actually eat out 2 to 3 days in a week. So the rest of the meals, you keep it as light as you can, as lean as you can, focus on your proteins, focus on your veggies. Maybe even reduce some of the carb intakes if you don't necessarily need that much and you're not super active. And then when you do it that way, you can then really enjoy those meals out because that's where majority of your carbs and fats can come from. So it's not that you're going low carb as a whole diet, but you're just knowing when to pull back and then when to spend. which is just prudent, just being prudent and being very intentional about it.
Okay.
Does it answer the question, you think?
Yeah. Uh, I think I would add to it is as well from personal experience is as somebody who's always loved to eat potato chips or crisps as they're called in the UK.
Yeah.
I also had to make a swap there, and the swap that I made was I swapped to popcorn.
Oh,
And
okay.
the reasons why I swapped to popcorn is a lot higher in fiber than what crisps are. I think it's about 4 or 5 times the amount of fiber that you're getting for the same amount that you're eating. And then it's
You know what?
obviously
You know what?
also a lot
No,
lower in fat. Mm.
yeah, but you know what? I think another swap you could do for that would be um corn chips.
Oh,
So if you like potato chips, swap it over to like tortilla chips, basically, because those will also have a generally higher amount of fiber to them
mm.
compared to like regular potato chips. Um, and comparable, I would say, to popcorn. The only issue I have with popcorn is that for a lot of people, popcorn is one of those foods that have a true, like I mentioned earlier, vanishing caloric density to it, right? 100 grams of popcorn, you could eat that and be like, after that, feel like you didn't really eat much or you didn't really eat anything. Whereas, like, let's say with like a proper tortilla chip, you could eat that and there's a bite to it, it's firm. It's not like a Pringle chip where it just crumbles. So I do think that as a swap might be a better option for potato chips if that's what you like. That being said, I am a big fan of popcorn. For those who follow me on Instagram and stuff, they oftentimes see my nightly popcorn ritual with my wife where we watch stuff. Although right now I've actually swapped over to the tortilla chips, and I go through in phases. I cycle through them, so that for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I'll be on tortilla chips, and then after that I'll swap back to like popcorn and what have you.
Mm.
And recently I've been swapping over to salami and well, I'm using toast, but I would probably want to use like water crackers, and
Ugh,
then
so
maybe add some
posh.
cheese to it.
So
Yeah,
posh.
I want some quality. Yeah.
But I think I also need to just say is like when I'm talking about the popcorn that we eat, it's also just a plain popcorn. I'm not dousing it in
Okay, okay,
sugar or dousing it
okay.
in salt or dousing it in honey or whatever other things that people caramel or that people usually put
Yeah,
onto the popcorn. Those obviously would add to the calories and all that kind of stuff.
yeah,
But yeah, it's just a simple practical swap that we found worked quite well for us. Yeah,
yeah.
I think that covers it from my side. Do you have anything else you just want to add or all good?
Uh, no, I think we're good. We've talked a lot about it. There definitely are a few other topics I think on that we mentioned there that we could even do like further episodes on. But yeah, if this resonated with you, maybe just let us know. How should they reach us?
They can hit us up in the comments on the platform that they're
Okay.
listening on. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I forgot we are putting this on YouTube as well. Okay, cool,
Yes, we're
cool.
on YouTube too.
So if you're watching this, yeah, please
Mhm.
put some comments below this, kind of help us. Let us know what you think, and yeah, we can just hopefully grow even more.
So, as we've discussed today, the world of processed foods isn't black and white. While those ultra processed options are often best kept to a minimum, some minimally processed foods can actually be helpful tools in our journey to a fitter, healthier life after 40.
Yeah,
The key takeaway is be informed, read those labels, and prioritize whole, nourishing foods as the cornerstone of your diet. But remember, small, consistent changes make a big difference. And if you found this episode helpful and know someone else over 40 who's striving for a healthier lifestyle, please share it with them. And to make sure you never miss an episode packed with tips and insights to help you on your journey and to help us out, hit that subscribe button whenever you get your podcasts. Your support helps us continue to bring you valuable content. Other than that, join us next week in whatever topic we're going to be tackling to be determined. But until then, remember to keep making those healthy choices and remember to keep moving. We'll see you next week.
see you next week, guys. Thank you so much.